Hello there, hunters. My name is Ravonneig, and welcome back. So today is going to be a little bit a different format of a video. I figured I would kind of record myself as well when we're talking about the newest trailer that was announced or showcased in the Summer Game Fest 2024. So I figured that I would kind of go through with it and talk about it, give you my opinions on it. We're mostly focusing on the gameplay aspects, not so much on the story or whatever, just gameplays, monsters, and things of that nature. So the trailer starts off with the kid in the story kind of seeing new monsters in the distance. So as far as we know, that's what the kid sees. It could be different from the actual game, but in this situation, that's what happens. So let's go through with it. So in the distance, very reminiscent of a situation that happens in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate as well as Monster Hunter Tri, where we see Jen Moran coming from the sand. In this case, it's these herd animals. And this is kind of reminiscent of Monster Hunter Tri's intro sequence, where we see herd animals getting chased and it kind of ends up with Lagiacrus coming to the land. But this is very similar to that in some sense, where these herd animals are kind of seemingly being chased by something. We don't really know if it's just the herd animals being herd animals or if they're being chased by something. Usually when herd animals escape like this, it's usually something bigger is behind them, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's pretty much what we see, and they are indeed called Balaharas, those monsters. And this sequence here, of course, is it's just showcasing that the hunter is coming from the town to accept this mission, so that I can give you an example of what happens in most of the world. There is a researcher that we need to find, and we need to go to this quest and go find this researcher. And what happens is that we find the researcher being trapped by Charatodes. So this is very similar to that, this sequence. The hunter comes in, tries to find a character, which in this case is a mysterious man. We don't know who it is, but it seems like the village chief or something like that. So as we go along here, our Palico here cutely is pointing out that over there, and of course there we see that the village chief or this mysterious man is indeed trapped by these little Balaharas, right? And this sequence here is very what we're going to see here is very much a scripted chase sequence. So many games do this, and it's not necessarily something that we will always see in the game happen. It's mostly that when we follow the story of the game, these sequences happen, and it offers some variation to the gameplay that isn't strictly hunting monsters. So it's kind of showcasing as well the differences between Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Wilds, where in World, usually when we have these cutscenes, you have to kind of look at them from start to end, and then the hunt begins. But in this case, they are kind of showcasing this seamless aspect of you going into a cutscene suddenly, and then you're playing, and going back to a cutscene and you're playing again. So it's very similar to what many AAA games do these days because of the slow or the fast loading times that's possible. It's completely like normal these days. So yeah, we go here and we see this cutscene play out. And of course, here's a cute look at one of the Balaharas. And we also see the mysterious man wielding a staff of some kind. Now, I can 100% guarantee that this is not a new weapon. It would be completely out of character for Monster Hunter to do this stinky ass stick. So this is mostly just a walking stick for this shaman. So this character has a very shaman-esque outfit to him. So it's a walking stick for him to be able to walk on the sand and not be completely drowned in the sand, or sink in the sand, I guess. But yeah, that's the Balahara, very interesting. And of course we are going to join in the fray and try to help out as best as we can. And here is another cool little, I really like to kind of focus on these small little details. So we see the hunter shooting the slinger shot, and very similar to Monster World, but in this case we don't really know what kind of an ammunition that is. I would say that that is very close to how scatternuts work in Monster World. So it's probably a scatternut-esque shot where it's like a shrapnel ammo. It's for sure not a slinger thorn, which usually attaches to monsters. So as we see here, as we move on, the hunter shoots it and it kind of sparks all around, causing a kind of a shockwave. So the monster reels back. Very similar to what happens in Monster World, where the hunter kind of shoots a Barroth in the eye with a scatternut. So it's kind of a callback, maybe, that this is Monster World indeed. So yeah, seamless transition here. Well, quote unquote seamless, but after the follow me, this is kind of where the cut happens and we are in the gameplay. So if we look at here, kind of back here, after the follow me, there's a little bit of a walk here and it cuts. It doesn't like seamlessly transition into the camera being behind you. So there is a bit of a cut here, but we'll see how that is actually in game, if the cut is still there. But regardless, this is still a scripted sequence. It's a chase sequence. So keep that in mind. This is not going to be in the full game. Like, it's going to be in the full game, but when you actually play the game and hunt monsters, you're not always going to be in these chase sequences. And on the left side here, as we go along, you can see a sort of a green thing on the rock there. And that seems to be a collectible of some kind. Now, from my mind, what I see around it is scout flies. And that could indicate that it's a track, a monster track that you can collect. We do know that we can collect certain things from a distance. So maybe tracks behave the same way, where we can just collect the tracks from a distance. That could be one way to handle the kind of downside of track collecting, or collecting tracks, which is that your hunter needs to kind of collect the track and then sniff it, and you have this whole animation about it. But in this case, it seems to be more like a, hey, I'm just gonna shoot my slinger and collect this thing. But if it's not a monster track, then I don't know what it is. It looks like a slime of some kind, but it doesn't look like a bug. I looked at it very closely and it doesn't look like a cold beetle or anything like that. It's more like a materia of some kind. So we'll see what it is actually in game, but yeah, just a little heads up there. And in the distance we see winged drakes, of course. Now, the way that winged drakes worked in Monster World is that if you shot them with your slinger, you could actually grapple onto them and fly into different locations. Now, in Wilds, I hope that that's still the case, because we don't have a flying mount of any kind. So if you're able to use these winged drakes, then hopefully it is in the same vein, but hopefully it's also better, so that it's not so slow that we don't ever use them. So in World, while it was a cool gameplay aspect, we never used it because it was so slow to use them, and there was no clear indication as to where they would lead. So a lot of players just didn't use them because they would end up in a location they didn't know they needed to go, or whatever. So hopefully these are a little bit easier to use, or maybe they just skip that mechanic entirely. Either one is fine, but I do hope that it's still possible to do that. No reason to remove that system, really. So yeah, they're kind of indicating the chase sequence here. And the interesting part here is that all of these Balaharas seem to be the same monster. They don't seem to have like a minor version of Balahara. So they're all the same Balaharas. So keep that in mind as we go forwards here. Some of them are just colored differently because they're in the sand and whatnot. And of course, here we see the first time that the hunter is actually going to use the weapons with the mount. So able to hack and slash with the weapon and then pull out a bowgun as well. And it's interesting that the character is able to move the camera as well as shoot and aim with the weapon. So if you think about it from a controller scheme standpoint, it's going to be interesting. How do you steer your sacred and aim and shoot at the same time? Because you only have 2 joysticks, right? So it's interesting. So we're going to go a little bit deeper that later on, but I already know kind of how it's going to function. And yeah, I'm just kind of teasing you here a little bit. Interesting. And then we have this pitfall trap, of course, monster getting trapped in there, and or our hunter getting trapped in there. And this would be the sequence where the game kind of highlights which monster is this. So when the talking is over here, this would be the sequence most likely in the game where the game tells you what monster this is. So there would be like a name on the top right with Balahara. But what comes to mind from this design of the monster is that I understand the apprehension that people have towards this specific design of the monster. Not because it's too alien or anything. Well, to a certain degree, yes. More so that when we look at Monster Hunter monster designs, they usually have a very specific style to them, to their location. So if you have a sand monster, it makes sense that the monster looks that way because it's in the sand. So if you have a water monster, it looks like it resides in the water. If you have a monster that resides in the volcano area, it looks like a monster that resides in the volcano area. This monster specifically, to me, seems like it resides everywhere. That's my gut feeling. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing this monster in the volcano area. I wouldn't mind seeing this monster in the tundra area, simply because of the design, how it's designed. Not saying that it's going to happen, that that's going to be the case. I do believe that it's a monster that resides only in the sand because it has the slime attack, that it shoots this slime towards the player. But because it's so heavily designed to be in the sand area, it doesn't fit into the world. Because unless we see this monster elsewhere in other locales, then it would make sense that, okay, this monster looks like this because it can reside pretty much everywhere and it can adapt to those areas. But here it just looks off because it doesn't look like a sand monster, right? And here we see the first showcase of a bowgun having a shield. Not at first, but first for Monster and Wilds. And it's a good thing that they kind of confirmed that bowguns have the shield attachment back. Not that it never needed to be removed or even was removed, but it's good that they're kind of showcasing that aspect. We don't really know that if all bowguns will have the shield or always, or if it's still an attachment that's how it used to be in previous games, right? In World you had to have an attachment of a shield to be able to block these attacks. So that's good to see. Most likely you still have to go to the bowguns upgrade path and have an attachment. Really neat to see here. And this let's go a little bit back. So this specific scene here, when we look at this monster, this looks like it's different from the other Balaharas, but it's not. I tried to kind of compare the other Balaharas to this one, what's the difference, and it seems like they're the same monster, exact same monster. I looked at the jaw kind of geometry, I guess, of the jaw and the upper jaw as well, but it seems to be the same monster all around, and it's just some of them are more sandy than others. It depends on when they're kind of coming from the sand and what have you. So they're like there's environmental differences, right? But there's no clear difference as to, is this a large monster, is this a small monster, what is this? Like, we don't really know. And yeah, here we see the kind of a interesting gameplay design decision that the devs have decided to do. It's going to kind of divide the Monster Hunter community to two kind of teams here. So on one hand, this is really fun, and it kind of highlights the aspect that you need to prepare for a hunt. You need to prepare correct weapons to bring with you. So you need to have a melee weapon, and you kind of need to have a ranged weapon as well, so you can deal with these situations when the monster is somewhere you can't reach easily. So a melee weapon here would be useless. So that's the aspect that I do really like. Of course, as a melee user, you could use your slinger in this situation, shoot a flash bomb or whatever have you to this monster and it falls down, or you could possibly break the rocks. They seem like you could hit the rocks and they break down and the monster falls down. Could be something like that. But I do enjoy that the gameplay is kind of highlighting the aspect, hey, this is the situation where you bring out your bowgun instead of your melee weapon. Now, on the other side of the aspect, we have the gamers that like the 1v1 aspect of Monster Hunter, where you get to demonstrate your abilities with one specific weapon and how good you are with that weapon. And these situations don't allow you to possibly do that so clearly. Of course, as I said, you could use flash bombs and other items like that to kind of benefit you. But when we go to the extreme end of that, where players do speed runs and use certain rule sets for their hunts, they're not allowed to use certain items, for example. They're not allowed to use flash bombs or whatever. Of course, the game isn't designed for those players in mind, but I can understand that those players that enjoy that aspect of Monster Hunter, where they limit themselves to enjoy the game, that's where this kind of a game design is a little bit questionable. But it's not a bad game design by any means. It's just that you have to deal with it your own way, and you have to deal with it if you set these rules by yourself, if you limit yourself to certain items or not using certain items, then you just have to deal with it, right? All right. So here again, they are showcasing the shield. This is nice, and they're showcasing this pitfall trap a little bit. Again, kind of calling back to Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and of course Monster Hunter World as well. Monster Hunter World had a pitfall like this where the hunter could get trapped into, or in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate there were a couple of sandy dunes that you could go into and break some rocks, and if monsters broke those rocks, then there was these pitfalls that you could get sucked into. And yeah, still nice to see that the leap is back, so you can kind of avoid attacks. Nothing too fancy here. And this one is interesting. So now we're going to go into more detail about the Sacred's movement options. So when I read the PlayStation Blog's website, apparently it said that there's you can kind of direct your Sacred to do certain things to avoid monsters is one of them. And I'm not entirely sure if they mean that when you're running, you can set it to avoid monsters, so that it kind of just runs to from one place to another without kind of interacting with monsters? Or is it this specifically so that you are able to use your weapon more freely, so that the sacred is doing actually the movements automatically? And the automatic part is what's scaring me the most. So when we look at the palamutes from Monster Rise and Sunbreak, there was option for us to give orders like stay put and follow me, and those are the two main options that you could use for a palamute. So similarly here, you probably can have a direction or an order for your sacred to avoid attacks or avoid monsters, whatever that may be. So in these situations, the sacred would avoid smallish to medium monster attacks to a certain degree, allowing you to use your bowgun freely. Because again, I have to emphasize, you only have two thumbsticks, two analog sticks. So you have one for your camera, one for your aim. And how do you control your sacred at that point? Monster Hunter usually does have D-pad for movement as well, but these recent games, they've kind of separated that to menu systems. So it's no longer about camera control so much. So in these situations, I think you are able to do like automatic movement for the sacred. Now, how useful that's going to be is going to be anyone's guess. From the looks of things, I'm a bit scared of what that actually causes, because if it does automatic dodges like this, like here we see an automatic dodge, if it does certain things like this, and you're just able to shoot with your weapon out pretty much freely, and the sacred does whatever it does and kind of avoids whatever, it's going to be a scary thing for most Hunter players, because it removes the aspect of actually needing to do anything. But hopefully it's managed some different way and it's not so automatic, and you kind of can only dodge certain attacks and things of that nature. Yeah, that's pretty much it what I have to say. But for sure, it seems to be like an actual order that you give to your sacred. And here we see a demonstration of the boost ability that the mounts from Monster Hunter Rise as well had, where you can press and hold a button and the mount will kind of drift a bit and run still, kind of, and then they get a speed boost. So here we see it pretty much. Let me showcase that again. Here. Yep, speed boost, cool. Now this is where I want to kind of emphasize what class of monsters are these. So we see a herd of these Balaharas in this sequence, as well as what is it called? Let me read my notes. It's Doshaguma, yeah. So there's a Doshaguma in the middle and 3 Balaharas attacking it. When we look at this sequence, it's scary, right? Because apparently these are large monsters, but the more that I look at this, I don't think that's really the case. I do think that there's a third kind of level to monster designs here. So there's small monsters like the crocodiles and whatever small monsters we see in the previous trailer. And these herd animals, they seem to be somewhere in between those and actual large monsters like Rathalos and even something like Gyrototus. So in Monster Hunter World, there was a Gyrototus monster that was like a mid-tier monster. And even if these monsters were on the level of a Gyrototus, this would be miserable, honestly miserable to encounter this situation. Of course, from a hunting aspect, it's an epic situation. Oh, there's so many of these large monsters and I can't deal with this situation, right? So if we look at this situation as if there was 3 Charatoduses here, you wouldn't be able to deal with this situation at all, right? You would always have to back off. You would always have to kind of separate the herd in some way in order to fight only one of these, right? That's an interesting aspect, but it's also scary from a gameplay aspect, because what it does is it forces these situations where you always have to separate the one from the herd. If they're on the level of a Charatodus, you wouldn't be able to hunt all of these 4 monsters at the same time, right? So every single time a situation like this happens in the game, you would have to back down and try to separate, right? Separate the one from the herd. And the Doshaguma also has herd animals with him. So the separation with the large Doshaguma is that it apparently has a red stripe that comes across its back, whereas the normal Doshagumas don't have that. But when we look at the first trailer, there's clearly difficulty in distinguishing the large monster from the smaller monsters. And here with the, what are these again? Balaharas. With the Balaharas, it's difficult to see if there's smaller versions of these at all. So this to me is really scary. It makes the game more gamey and gimmicky if we always have to back off and try to separate the monster or the large monster from the herd, simply because people usually want to kind of do their own thing, right? They don't want to play by the game's rules all the time. So if these situations happen all the time and we are always forced to back off, then it's too gimmicky, because it's just, for me, it kind of, it's scary. So yeah, that's my take on this. I do think that these are like medium-sized monsters overall, and they're not large monsters in the same sense that a Charatodus is a large monster or a Rathalos is a large monster. These are semi-medium monsters above like Kelbies, above like Bullfangos, above Kestodons, things like that. So you still have to spend some time hunting these things, but this situation here you possibly could do alone as well. So you could just attack all of these and kind of manage somehow. But the ideal situation to resolve this situation would be to kind of trap them in somewhere and try to get them one at a time, right? And then we go into the first actual monster that we see in these trailers, outside of the toad creature that we see in previous trailer. But this is an interesting one. Of course, everyone immediately went, oh, it's Shagaru Magala, but then lightning happened and oh, it's not Shagaru Magala. So this monster specifically, I 100% think that this is a bird wyvern. When we look at a specific angle here is a good one. You can see that there's clearly a beak and a big eye on the, well, here it's on the right side, but it's on the left side of the head. So it is a bird wyvern 100%, and it has thunder element. And we see that the tail is kind of like a peacock, kind of a feathery tail. Sorry. So yeah, it's interesting because first that I watched this, I couldn't see what the head actually was because of the horns. But once the horns kind of go to the side, you can see that the head is underneath it and it's this bird-like face. And from what I kind of researched, because I was immediately intrigued because it's a bird wyvern, of course, and there isn't too many bird wyverns overall in Monster Hunter. There's some, but I feel like they're kind of unused to a large degree. But there is one bird wyvern that uses the same skeleton and looks eerily similar, not quite similar, but has similar aspects to it. And that is called the Forokururu. Not sure there isn't an actual English translation to that, but it's Forokururu from Monster Hunter Frontier, and it has similar kind of scythe-like wings, but they're not as large as what we have here with this monster, which has like huge scythes on the side there on the wings. So it's not quite scythe-like on Forokururu, or what is it, Forokururu, in Frontier, but it's the same skeleton and it has very similar tail and whatnot. I also checked how many Thunder Element bird wyverns there are in the game, or in the franchise overall, and I only saw 3 of them. One of them is Crimson Kurupeko from Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and 2 of them are from Monster Hunter Frontier specifically, and those are Farunokku and Toritcles, I think is the name. So those are 2 Thunder Element bird wyverns, and of course from the quote-unquote main series, Crimson Kurupeko is the only one from 3 Ultimate. So it's interesting that they are using kind of a Thunder Element bird wyvern here, which we haven't seen in quite a while. Now, as for what this monster actually is, I firmly believe that this is the one that is actually causing the thunder to happen in this area. And I think that's kind of where they're going with these monster designs, is that they're usually like, especially when we look at Yuya Tokuda's way of designing Monster Hunter, there's usually been like a hierarchy of monsters, right? Like there's an alpha monster of the area. Now, in Monster Hunter World, it usually ended with Rathalos being the main monster of the area, but eventually we would discover that there's some other monster, like an Elder Dragon, that is above those, like Kushaladhara was in the Elder Recess or Ancient Forest, and then there was other Elder Dragons in different locales, like Coral Region had Namiel and Kirin as the Elder Dragons. So this could be something along those lines. I do not think that this is an Elder Dragon, so to speak, but I think that this is like an elemental alpha of the area. So when we see the area have certain thunderstorms or whatever, it's usually a monster that causes it, and it's the highest elemental monster of the area. So even if the area has an alpha monster like Rathalos in it, there's still something above it. And even something above this monster, there possibly is an Elder Dragon, because I don't think this is an Elder Dragon. So I think that's where they're going with. So if we go into a Tundra region, there's possibly some kind of a, let's say there's a fire monster in that area, because the area is mostly ice, so there must be like an elemental balance to that area, which is like a fire bird. So maybe that's the case that they're going with. So ice area would have like a Barrioth as the main alpha monster, but then there's like an elemental fire monster like above it, and then like there's, or like an ice Elder Dragon above that, like Velkhana would be above that. So I think that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting here with these. There might be all be birds as well. Like that would be a neat idea if each area has one of these birds that's just the elemental bird of the area. So one of them is lightning, one of them is fire, one of them is water, and one of them is whatever. So that would be a neat idea for me personally if that's the case. All right, so let's move on with this. of course, we see this is an actually interesting because this is the first time we see a village being attacked by these Doshagumas, and first time we actually see village being attacked at all in any Monster Hunter, really. And this area is as well is interesting because it kind of highlights that this village seems to be in a cave. So of course in the desert you kind of want to be in the shadows of a cave and where it's cold and it's easier to live there. So it's interesting that this is a cave area, and we haven't seen too many cave villages, so it's nice to have something like this. Not sure if we actually get to visit here or if it's just some cutscene thing that we kind of visit briefly, but we'll have to wait and see on that. The Doskuma attack here. And there's one aspect that I want to kind of highlight here when we kind of conclude this trailer with the amazing hunting aspect, what is hunting all about and whatever. But there's a couple of frames here before anything here that I kind of wanted to showcase, but I kind of turned around on it later on after I rewatched it multiple times. But is it here? It's here. So it's only a couple of frames, but here we see this situation where the hunter is grabbing the sword from the sand, and we see that the little kid is like behind us, right, on the mount. Not sure if he has like a horn on the side of the head. I'm not sure what's going on there. Not entirely sure what's going on with the kid, but he's holding on to us. But what actually kind of piqued my interest is who the other guy in the background is, because it looks like it's another hunter, right? And it looks like either our Palico is on that hunter, or that's a completely different hunter with their own Palico. But once I kind of looked at these scenes, I kind of put two and two together that the main hunter here doesn't have her Palico with her simply because it's on the other mount. So most likely that hunter there on the left side is just some random NPC from the town. It's not the village chief. The chief has different kind of an armor set and whatever. So this looks different. So my first take here was that maybe it was another player in the background, but the more that I looked at this sequence here, it doesn't appear to be the case. So far I'm sorry to say that there hasn't been a single cutscene that we see other players, but I was hoping that this would be it, but it doesn't seem to be the case. But yeah, interesting stuff here. Couple of still images, and we see the hunter actually leaping off the mount, leaving the kid behind. So we see the kid's hands there. So apparently the kid can just chill for a bit and we can attack the monster. Yeah, that's pretty much it that I have to say about this. Overall, when I look at the gameplay aspects of this, I'm concerned, of course, because there's some gameplay aspects that are iffy, and depending on how they handle you need to separate the herd all the time, and how they handle the sacred's movement options when you want to use your weapon and kind of let the sacred automatically do things, how they handle that. Those are two of the main problems, and of course a little bit scared about the aspect of monsters being able to be in places where you can't reach easily, but that's easily managed with having different weapons and whatnot, so it's not big of a deal. But mostly the herd aspect that's kind of scaring me, because I'm just hoping that these are just medium-sized monsters and something that you deal easily, something you deal with easily, and they're not actual large monsters that you have to hunt 15 minutes for. Because if there's like a herd of these monsters and you have to hunt them for 15 minutes, it's going to be insane. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on this, and we'll go to the next trailer, or the previous trailer, I have something to tell you guys about the focus mode and talk about that a little bit more. So thank you everyone for watching. I know this was a long one, but I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.